Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be looking at Flair basketball cards for 94.95 and 95.96. Now, Flair came into existence as the first ultra-premium brand for Flair, and they did so in baseball, and for the first year and a half, it was a baseball-only brand. They didn't launch it in basketball, they didn't do it in hockey, they didn't do it in football. So it wasn't until the 94-95 season when they finally started to launch them in both basketball and in hockey. The card brand really was designed around baseball, and that became perfectly apparent when they launched the basketball set, because for the baseball set, it was designed around a highly lacquered surface with some really strong colors, no border, a very thick cardstock, and a little bit of gold detailing, which all worked together in a very elegant way. The card didn't really have the kind of strength that a border or a strong element in a card normally provides. So this was all about the image, and in the baseball sets, they did tend to do a really good job with images. Now for 94, they were starting to get into some double images, which kind of convoluted things a little bit, but when they got to basketball, they ran into the major problem that the basketball set had, which is that anytime that you do a full bleed card, the image has to be able to carry entirely on its own. And with a basketball card, it's always difficult to do that because the basketball images, the backgrounds are so busy. In baseball, you have maybe a wall behind, you have some grass and maybe some infield dirt. It tends to be some big patches of color that kind of allows the player to really stand out as the detailing. In a basketball situation, though, it's a very dark arena, speckled with fans in the stands, maybe a hoop, maybe some players, people sitting on the sidelines. There's always a lot going on in the images. And so it becomes difficult to really showcase the player if you don't have a border to kind of work with. And especially when it gets dark, then the card doesn't really have the elements that stick out in the way that you normally would have. And so with the basketball cards, a lot of these cards are tough to read. In fact, most of these cards are really difficult to read. The cards still follow the same model. It's a highly lacquered card. The colors aren't too rich. They're kind of rich. The gold detailing kind of disappears into the card, unfortunately. And they, like I said, for 94, they used two images of the player. They used a cutout of the player in front of a picture of the player. And for cards like Hakeem Olajuwon, this really didn't work well. The card basically gets lost. You can't see the gold detailing. There's nothing that stands out in the card and really draws your eye in. When you look over at the card back, the white text just kind of disappears into the back. It's a very awkward card to work with. Now, it doesn't mean that none of the cards worked. It's just that the particular way that they made these cards, you really, really had to work on the images. And this is Flair, and they didn't like to do that. They didn't care about taking time with each individual card on an individual card basis. They tend to kind of run things together. So in this same set, you have a card like, say, Kevin Johnson. Now with KJ, you have to know who he is because you can't read the gold text on the bottom. The court shows up, which further causes a problem with gold text. So it becomes extremely difficult to see who the card is, but it is very clearly Kevin Johnson if you know who he is. The card, though, for KJ looks wonderful because they actually chose the images right. They got this card right. This is the kind of card you look at and say, okay, this set could really, really be something. And they didn't do it often enough, and so that's a shame. The card set also was entirely reliant on all these cards to work because they have no subsets. The closest they got to a subset was they have the USA basketball team, basically the Dream Team 2 players from the World Championship. And this came after the World Championship, which means that all the players are in their jerseys in action shots. So the cards actually look really good, and it's a nice quality that they have, the fact that the players are in action shots, which isn't too common with these USA basketball team sets. So it should be a great set, but unfortunately the cards still don't read too terribly well. So the one part of the set that should stand out actually kind of, in my experience, they tend to kind of fade into the background. They're among the less dynamic cards. It's a cool idea. I like that they had it, but other than those few cards like the main Kevin Johnson card, there's not much that really stands out. Fortunately, the one card that needed to stand out did, because 94-95 was the year when Michael Jordan came back. So basically, Series 2 sets often would have Michael show up, and this is one of those sets. And the Jordan card's fantastic. I happen to feel that the KJ card is slightly better, but in terms of all of these He's Back cards that were done across all the different brands, basically the Michael Jordan Jersey 45 cards, this to me is hands down the best. This is the card that really, it doesn't necessarily showcase him as much as this is a really significant time when these cards came out, and this is the card to get. This is the card that really stands out. So I love this card. I really love it. Now, this is the mid-90s for Flair, and so that means we're going to be talking about inserts. And they didn't get too carried away with inserts, but they had some really, really good insert sets. It's only 6, so it's basically 3 for first series, 3 for second series. The first insert set is Center Stage, and this is a card set that all I can say is, wow, they had potential. And that's all they had, potential. They didn't realize it. There's a lot of stuff going on with the texturing of the card. They used brushed metal and modeled etched metal effects on it, kind of interplayed with the idea of a spotlight. It's called Center Spotlight, and so you would expect for them to go with that. And so what they're playing around with the colors, the 3 shadows of the different colors, and the spotlight with the different textures on the outside, the way that they played with all of this stuff, there's so much they could have done, and I don't feel like they developed anything. So I don't like this card set. At the same time, I kind of like it because I know there's something special there. It's just it doesn't bring me in. Fortunately for one of the standard Flair insert sets, Hot Numbers, they really got this one right. This one more than makes up for it. This is just, it is a straightforward, pure Flair card. And they did this in every set. They did in football. And with the others, they're good. I mean, they're really good. But this one, to me, this is the highlight. This is the high point, the high watermark for these cards. The way that the muted colors work, the way that the text works, the way that everything is set up in a very blocky way. When I look at this, I actually think of the bell tower at It's a Small World at Disneyland. It has that quality to it, but it is extremely formal. The card back also looks pretty good, but the card front is, to me, it's fantastic. This is pretty much the standard bearer for this entire set. Definitely not so much with Playmakers. Playmakers was a set of basically point guards, so this is my territory, and they used a wood paneling, basically a parquet floor backdrop with that should work really well, but they have these key elements again in the 3 colors that kind of gets in the way of it. Now the player doesn't really stand out from this background, so that kind of hampers it. But this is not a good card when you look at it individually, but if you put 9 together on a page, now it actually starts to look pretty good because the players start to pop out, and that's where I think it really looks the way that it should look. So this is a card with some potential. It's okay. I mean, really, all of the inserts in this set are above average. It's just that when you raise that bar up with that median level up, this doesn't quite reach the level that the others did. Again, because the skin tones versus the parquet floor backing, just they don't quite match up well in terms of contrast. Otherwise, I think it's a really good start. Then they have Rejectors, and Rejectors is definitely the sibling to Center Stage. They do the same thing, but they do it in a different way. And here, it's kind of a big mess. It's a lot of color. It's a lot of reflected light from all of the etched metal, the modeled metal, all the things that I talked about in the Center Stage. Here, they did it in a big jumbled mess. It's kind of like Mardi Gras, and yet that's what makes it work. There's so much stuff going on that it's vibrant, it's really lively, it's really kind of intriguing, even though you don't really necessarily get drawn into exploring it. And then the player gets contrasted on top of that. So the combination of all those works really well, and I look at this and I say, yes, that's exactly what Center Stage should have been. So I'm glad that one of these sets actually got to this point. They also did their standard scoring power set, and this is a horizontally oriented card. And this, again, goes back to the very formal, straightforward, basically all the Series 1 inserts did this, very simple and straightforward approach to a card. They didn't do anything, they didn't try any tricks with it. It is basically almost a deep olive color with the word scoring power in it, which is all the letters are cutouts to an image behind with a superimposed image of the player on the front. That's basically it. And it's just simple, straightforward, clean. It looks really good. They also did their standard Wave of the Future, again horizontal, and it's got a big wave pattern with a very bright color in it, but this also works extremely, extremely well. These are beautiful cards. The horizontal orientation gives them a lot to work with, and the superimposition of the 3-player shots on the front works beautifully. The card back looks beautiful. This is really the way these cards should be designed. So all of these card sets, like I said, in all the insert sets here, were above average. Some of them were super successful. Other ones, not quite so much. But when they tried to play around with tricks, they either made it work or they didn't. When they got away from that, they tended to do a really good job. So these insert sets are really, really, really great successes. I wish that the main set had been a success. For 95-96, they were going to have to rethink the model, but before they got around to that, they did a preview set in their Flair set. So here they did, and this is something they've done in football as well. Basically, it's kind of like the MVP for every single team. So this is a set of 27 cards. Even though you now had the Toronto Raptors and the Vancouver Grizzlies added to the collection of teams, they didn't have an MVP yet because they hadn't played a season. So it's only 27 cards. But it's basically the best player in every single team. And sorry, Scotty, Michael had come back, so he gets to be in the set. And these cards are very, very formal, very straightforward, really nice. It's basically a floor around a key, and that's about it. But that's all it needed to be. So, and these cards are pretty common because they were 1 per pack in Flair, and so a Flair box was 36 packs, 1 per pack. That's 36 cards for a 27 card set. That means that you have a very good chance of getting 1 set per box. So that means if you want to get this set, it's very easy to do it, not very expensive. And on top of that, the cards look fantastic. I mean, we'll see about how affordable the MJ cards end up being down the road because there's a lot of enthusiasm about them right now, as there always is. But other than that, if you love basketball in the 90s, to me, this is one of those sets you have to have. You absolutely have to. You really don't have any excuse because it is common enough. It's very accessible. Now, for the main set, the 95-96 set, like I said, they had to rethink the model, and so what they had gone with for the 95 year was to do kind of a modeled metal technique, a modeled etch technique for the background. And this created a very lively background, but interestingly enough, they heavily lacquered the surface. So you look at this and you expect to see texturing, but you don't feel it. The whole card feels uncomfortably smooth, which is just, it's an effect you got to get used to, just so that you know if you haven't encountered these cards. There's kind of a plasticky quality to some of the images, so the cards actually feel really cheap. They kind of worked in football, but for the basketball cards, I don't feel that they really work too well. And I think the biggest problem is that the background is too lively. So they tried something, it almost worked. The card backs, on the other hand, work beautifully. They finally figured out how to do it. Now, the previous year, there were a lot of problems with the card back, the worst being that the font of the card number was horrible. But the fact that they had white text over an image it's just a recipe for disaster. It was a terrible approach for them to take. In this year, with 95-96, they actually fixed that by creating basically a big color patch, which by color I mean a big black patch on one side that fades into an image on the other side. And they put all the text on top of that. The gold logo was now able to go on that instead of an image. So where on the previous year you couldn't see a thing on the card back, here you could see everything. And on top of that, the card numbers, they have a good font, they have large gold foil for the text, and against the black backdrop, it stands out really well. So this is a success across the board. I love the card backs. I wish the card fronts had been better. Now, like in the previous season, we had a player coming back out of retirement, and this time it was Magic Johnson. But unlike Michael, Magic got to be in Series 1, so there's a Magic Johnson card in here. It's kind of special, kind of rare, and it's a neat one to have and looks pretty good. But in Series 2, they had the expansion players. And here for this set, they didn't do anything special, because often they like to do like some special design for expansion players. Here they just said, well, here they are in their new jerseys. So Alvin Robertson is in his Toronto jersey, etc., etc. And the cards look really great as a result. They sell you on, yeah, this is what these guys look like. And I like that quality. I like the fact that they didn't do it up. They also had a subset, and they had rookies. The rookie cards were, they were kind of like a cross between the 2 years. So this design, they got away from the speckled quality and just got down to some straight images. So again, this goes right down to a pure Flair card. But they tended to choose really good images for the rookies, and that's the success point for these cards. They look great. I think these may very well be the best looking rookie cards for this great rookie class. And on the card back, they went with green instead of black, which was, a bit of a step down, but the card fronts look so fantastic that I really don't mind. Also, the subset in the set looks good too, Style, which is a cutout of the player against a big headshot in the background in a kind of a green tint with some words over it. It's a horizontal card. It actually looks really, really good. It's very formal. It's very nice. I do like it a lot. On the card back, they use burgundy. That's a huge plus. But these cards they're a great subset. Basically, they're exactly what you would expect for a subset from Flair. So in Series 2, they really hit their stride. They figured out how to make great Flair cards, but as I'll mention very briefly later on, they would really have to rethink the whole model. But again, this is mid-90s Flair, so that means we've got a lot of inserts to talk about, and here we actually do have quite a few. They start off with Anticipation, and Anticipation is a highly lacquered, high contrast in terms of color card. It's very vibrant. It's not elegant. It's very much like a Caribbean party, but it is cool. It is fun. It's neat to look at. And the big thing with this card is that it is actually embossed. And embossing basically means that the front gets raised up, so it's kind of three-dimensional, and on the bottom it has the concave surfaces where it got raised up. So there's that in it, which makes it pretty cool, and it's a very thick card, so it holds up really well. And then they did Center Stage, and like in the previous year, this is actually a letdown. It's an acetate card, one of only two that they did here, so it's kind of see-through. They again used the three-color spotlight thing, and it's there. They just, I don't know why they couldn't figure out how to do center spotlight well. Fortunately, there aren't a lot of cards in the set, but there it is. Fortunately, they more than made up for pretty much everything with the Class of 95 cards, and these are very common cards. So again, this is an easy set to get, but in this case, they basically did a basketball fading into black where they used that same mottled metal approach in the background to make it all very lively and vibrant with a really good contrasted picture of the player on the front. And the success of this card is great. I've always loved these cards, and like I said, this is an easy one to get. So for a great rookie draft class like this is one of those great sets you got to get at some point just to have it. Even just getting one of these cards, this is one of those few cases where an individual card just looks so good, especially rare because of the fact that it's fairly affordable. So definitely a card to check out if you haven't had a chance. But where they really had a lot of fun was with the Hot Numbers card. And here they actually used lenticular card design for it, which basically gives a three-dimensional quality within. And the card, this is the kind of card where I look at it and I have to wonder, did they have like a brainstorming session at Disneyland? Because this looks just like Disney's Alice in Wonderland. It's really cool, all these numbers floating around, really colorful. And the depth in it is great. The card looks great. I think it's a very successful card. I love it a lot. And again, like with Series 2, I'm not the only one. This is one of those sets I didn't get early enough, and now it's really tough to get, which is a shame, but just getting one of these cards is more than worth it. So I really love that. Then they have New Heights, and New Heights is one of those classic Flair cards where they just went with a straightforward, simple card, very bold, very straightforward. They did it right. An array of shots of the player against a really well-designed, somewhat understated, simplified card back that looks good. I like the colors. I like everything about this card. It's not too much. It's not enough. It's everything in perfect harmony to me. They also have Perimeter Power, and this is one where, just in case Hot Numbers hadn't verified the brainstorming session at Disneyland, this one most definitely did. This is straight up Alice in Wonderland. I don't know what they were going with for this card. I like the fade into the back, which is kind of like the Class of 95 cards, but the back of this it's gorgeous, and it really does make you feel almost like the Disney falling down the rabbit hole kind of effect. It's neat in that regard. So I don't know, I love these cards. I really do. Unfortunately, Playmakers, not so much. They again went with the lenticular card design here. And in this case, I'd like to talk about the card, but the problem is they have this, it's almost like film over the front. And you got to wonder, is it clean? Well, if you turn the card over, you'll notice that no, in the back, they have that same film treatment. By film, I mean dirty film. It's actually designed onto the card front. It looks so weird, and it ruins a really, really good card design. So that bothers me about this card. while I love the hot numbers, this one to me is just, it's an enormous letdown. And you know, Flair can't help but get in its own way far too often, and this is definitely one of those examples. They also have Wave of the Future, of course, and this also isn't quite as good as the previous year, but it's still pretty good. Basically, there's a cutout of the player, and then there are wavy versions of that same picture in the background, and that's about it, but it's there. But the only other thing to talk about is in 95-96, Flair did a whole series called Stackhouse's Scrapbook, because Jerry Stackhouse was the big rookie for that particular year, and they did 2 cards from each of their different sets. And the Flair set, they went with the acetate again. Here they just went with the straightforward little oval in the middle, you know, not very much to it, but there are 2 of those cards, so that's about it. But that is basically all they did for Flair for 94-95 and for 95-96. The problem was they couldn't figure out how to evolve the brand. They could have gone back to a more straightforward form. I think they really could have pulled it off, but they felt that as the 90s were progressing, they had to rethink the entire model, which is exactly what they would do. So they would come back in 96-97 with a very, very, very different card. So I'm going to look at that in a whole nother video because it is basically another card. So, but this is what they did for the first 2 years. It's a lot of fun, some really, really nice cards, mainly the inserts. And the regular cards, oftentimes, you know, not so much. But they've got some that really do come out, and that Jordan card, that is definitely a must-have. So that's pretty much it. Look forward to the videos that I'll be coming out with later on. Hope you've learned something, and if you haven't subscribed, definitely do so. And thank you very much for watching.